A little girl came to the job interview. The millionaire CEO soon discovers she came in place of her mother, who is hospitalized, and he's left speechless. Before the story begins, wherever life has placed you today, this message is for you. The towering glass headquarters of Meridian Enterprises gleamed in the morning sunlight as Sophia Chin adjusted her backpack and stared up at the 50-story building. At just 7 years old, she stood barely 4 feet tall in her neatly ironed blue dress and white cardigan, her special occasion outfit that Mom had laid out the night before. "You can do this, Sophia," she whispered to herself, clutching the worn leather portfolio that contained her mother's resume. Her honey-blonde pigtails bobbed as she nodded with determination. The night before had been a blur of fever and frightening moments. Sophia remembered her mother, Maria, coughing violently around midnight, struggling to catch her breath. The ambulance lights had painted their small apartment in red and blue as paramedics carried her mother away on a stretcher. "Mommy has to go to the hospital," Mija, Mrs. Rodriguez from next door, had explained, holding Sophia close as the ambulance disappeared into the night. "But she'll be okay. She's strong, just like you." Welcome to the Black Side Stories. Before we continue, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, subscribe to our channel and help us share their stories. Sophia had barely slept, clutching her mother's portfolio and remembering the countless hours Maria had spent preparing for this interview. The presentation boards spread across their kitchen table, the practice speeches Sophia had listened to while doing homework, the careful selection of Maria's best professional outfit hanging in the closet. "This job could change everything for us, Sophia," her mother had said just 2 days ago. "Good health insurance, stable income, a chance for me to use my skills again. It's exactly what we need." Now, standing before the imposing building, Sophia knew she couldn't let her mother down. The interview was too important to cancel, and Maria had worked too hard to let this opportunity slip away. Inside the lobby, Sophia approached the reception desk, standing on tiptoes to see over the counter. The marble floors echoed with the clicking of heels as professionally dressed people moved with purpose through the space that seemed designed to intimidate. "Excuse me," she said, her voice small but clear. "I have a 9 o'clock appointment with Mr. David Mitchell." The receptionist, Jennifer, according to her nameplate, looked up from her computer with a bewildered expression. Her perfectly manicured nails paused over the keyboard as she processed the unusual sight before her. "I'm sorry, sweetie, are you lost? Where are your parents?" Sophia straightened her shoulders, remembering her mother's lessons about confidence and professionalism. "My mom is Maria Chun. She has an interview for the project manager position." She placed the portfolio on the counter with careful precision. "I'm here in her place." Jennifer's confusion deepened, her training manual having never covered this particular scenario. "That's not how interviews work, honey. Your mother needs to come herself." "She can't." Sophia's voice wavered slightly, the weight of the previous night's events pressing down on her small shoulders. "She's in the hospital. They took her last night when she couldn't breathe right. But she really needs this job." The honesty in Sophia's voice carried across the busy lobby, causing several passing executives to slow their pace and glance toward the reception desk with curious expressions. That a tall man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit had paused nearby, his attention caught by the unusual conversation. David Mitchell, CEO of Meridian Enterprises, was known throughout Chicago's business community for his ruthless efficiency and brilliant strategic mind. At 45, his reputation preceded him into every room, a man who had built a financial empire through calculated decisions and unwavering focus. What he wasn't known for was changing his schedule for anyone, particularly not for unscheduled interruptions to his meticulously planned day. Mitchell had arrived early that morning, as was his custom, reviewing quarterly reports and preparing for what he expected to be a routine series of interviews for the project manager position. The role had been vacant for 6 weeks since their previous manager had relocated to the West Coast, and the backlog of delayed projects was beginning to impact their bottom line. He'd reviewed dozens of resumes, conducted preliminary phone screenings, and narrowed the field to 5 promising candidates. Maria Chun had stood out on paper, impressive credentials, strong references, and a track record of success that suggested she could handle the complex demands of the position. "Jennifer, what's the situation here?" His deep voice carried across the lobby, causing several junior employees to straighten their postures instinctively. "Mr. Mitchell, this little girl says she's here for the project manager interview in place of her mother." Mitchell approached, studying Sophia with piercing blue eyes that had unnerved countless business adversaries over the years. His salt and pepper hair and commanding presence normally intimidated even seasoned executives, yet something about the child's composure intrigued him. "Young lady, what's your name?" "Sophia Chun, sir," she replied, meeting his gaze directly without flinching. "My mom taught me it's important to look people in the eyes when you speak to them. She says it shows respect and confidence." A hint of amusement flickered across Mitchell's usually stoic expression. In boardrooms filled with Harvard MBAs and industry veterans, he rarely encountered such direct communication. "And where exactly is your mother, Sophia?" "Northwestern Memorial Hospital. She has pneumonia, but the doctors say she'll be okay in a few days." Sophia's small fingers unzipped the portfolio with practiced ease. "I brought her resume and her certificates. She stayed up all night working on her presentation before she got sick." Sophia carefully extracted the documents, arranging them on the counter with the same attention to detail she'd observed her mother demonstrate countless times. The resume was printed on premium paper, the presentation materials organized in clear protective sleeves, and a folder of references meticulously alphabetized. Mitchell glanced at his watch. 9:02 a.m. His schedule showed back-to-back interviews until noon, followed by a lunch meeting with potential investors and an afternoon board presentation. Every minute was accounted for, every decision calculated for maximum efficiency. Yet something about Sophia's determination, her careful preparation, and the obvious effort her mother had invested in this opportunity made him pause. "Sophia Chun," he said, his voice softening slightly. "I've conducted over 5,000 interviews in my career, but this is certainly a first." He extended his hand, noting how she shook it with the same firmness her mother had likely taught her. "Come up to my office. Let's hear what your mother had prepared." Jennifer's mouth fell open as Mitchell guided Sophia toward the executive elevator, her disbelief evident to everyone in the lobby. In 15 years of working at Meridian, she'd never seen the CEO deviate from protocol, much less escort a child to his private office. "Sir," Sophia said as the elevator doors closed, her voice echoing slightly in the confined space. "Mom says I'm too young to drink coffee, but I know how to make it if you'd like some. She taught me how to use the coffee maker at home in case she ever needed help in the mornings." For the first time in years, David Mitchell laughed genuinely, not the calculated chuckle he used in board meetings or the polite smile he offered clients, but a real laugh that surprised him with its spontaneity. He had no idea this unexpected meeting would change everything. David Mitchell gestured for Sophia to take a seat in the plush leather chair across from his expansive mahogany desk. The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a wall of achievements that told the story of his rise to corporate prominence. Business magazine covers featuring his stern face, awards for industry leadership, and framed photos with politicians and celebrities. Sophia's small form seemed almost lost in the oversized chair, her feet barely touching the ground. Yet she sat with the same composed posture her mother had drilled into her during countless practice sessions. At their kitchen table, "So Sophia," Mitchell said, settling into his own chair and activating the recording device he used for all interviews. "Tell me about your mother's qualifications." Sophia opened the leather binder with practiced care, her small fingers navigating to the first section with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed this moment many times. "Mom has been a project manager for 8 years. She worked at Westlake Solutions until they closed last month." Her small finger traced the resume as she spoke, a habit she'd picked up from watching her mother review documents. "She has a PMP certification and an MBA from Northwestern." Mitchell raised an eyebrow, impressed not just by the credentials, but by Sophia's articulate delivery. Most 7-year-olds he'd encountered spoke in simple sentences about cartoons and playground activities. Yet here was a child discussing professional certifications with remarkable understanding. "And why does your mother want to work at Meridian?" Sophia's response came without hesitation, carrying the weight of conversations she'd overheard during sleepless nights when her mother thought she was asleep. Because we need the health insurance, she answered honestly. And because she says your company does important work that helps people. Also because our old insurance won't cover all of her hospital bills, and she's worried about our savings running out. The directness of her response caught Mitchell off guard. Most candidates danced around compensation discussions with rehearsed speeches about company culture and growth opportunities, carefully avoiding any mention of personal financial needs. Mom's really good at her job, Sophia continued, pulling out a folder of project completion reports with the pride of a child showing off a parent's accomplishments. These are her success stories. The Hartwell renovation project was finished 2 weeks early and $50,000 under budget. She stayed up making this presentation even though she was getting sick. Mitchell flipped through the meticulously prepared materials, noting Maria's impressive track record of successful projects, client testimonials that praised her attention to detail and ability to manage complex timelines, and performance reviews that consistently rated her as exceeding expectations. The presentation boards Sophia carefully extracted from the portfolio revealed the depth of Maria's preparation. Detailed project timelines, cost-benefit analyses, and strategic recommendations for improving Meridian's current project management processes. Work that clearly represented hours of research and professional insight. Who's taking care of you while your mother is in the hospital? Mitchell asked, setting down the materials and studying Sophia's expression. Sophia's composed facade faltered slightly, revealing the vulnerable child beneath the professional presentation. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door checked on me this morning, but she's really old and gets tired easily. I can take care of myself, though. I make my own lunch for school, and I know how to use the microwave safely. A heaviness settled in Mitchell's chest as he absorbed the implications of Sophia's matter-of-fact statement. How many children her age were responsible for their own basic care? Where is your father, Sophia? Sophia shrugged as if discussing the weather, a gesture that spoke volumes about how often she'd fielded this question. He left when I was a baby. Mom says he wasn't ready to be a dad. She paused, then added with the wisdom of someone far older than her years. It's just us, but we're a good team. Mom says teams work best when everyone does their part. Mitchell found himself studying the child before him with growing amazement. Here was a 7-year-old who spoke about teamwork and responsibility with more maturity than many of his senior executives demonstrated. Sophia, can you tell me more about what your mother does as a project manager? In your own words? Sophia's face brightened, clearly entering more comfortable territory. She makes sure everything gets done on time and doesn't cost too much money. Like when we planned my birthday party, she made lists of everything we needed, figured out how much it would cost, and made sure we had enough time to get everything ready. She paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. At work, she does the same thing but with bigger projects. She talks to lots of different people to make sure they all know what they're supposed to do, and she checks on them to make sure nothing goes wrong. The simplicity of Sophia's explanation impressed Mitchell more than the most sophisticated business presentation. She had distilled the essence of project management into terms anyone could understand while demonstrating a clear grasp of the fundamental concepts. She also fixes problems, Sophia added. Like when the Hartwell project had that issue with the permits, Mom figured out a way to keep working on other parts while they waited for approval. She says good project managers always have a plan B. Mitchell studied the child before him, poised, articulate, and carrying responsibilities far beyond her years. Something about her determination stirred long-dormant memories, emotions heat, successfully buried beneath layers of corporate focus and professional achievement. One moment, he said, pressing his intercom button with a decision that surprised even him. Patricia, cancel my morning meetings. His assistant's shocked voice came through the speaker, carrying 15 years of experience working with a man who never deviated from his schedule. Sir, you have the board presentation at 11 o'clock, and the Steinberg interview is scheduled for 9:30. Reschedule everything, and find out which doctor is treating Maria Chun at Northwestern Memorial. Mitchell's tone brooked no argument, though he could practically hear Patricia's jaw dropping on the other end of the line. That Sophia's eyes widened with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Are you going to visit my mom? We are, Mitchell replied, standing and reaching for his coat. I need to meet the woman who raised such an extraordinary representative. As they rode the elevator down to the parking garage, Sophia looked up at him with curious brown eyes that reminded him painfully of another child he'd once known. "Mr. Mitchell, why are you helping us? Mom says busy, important people don't usually have time for situations like ours." The question pierced him unexpectedly. Why indeed? Mitchell had built his reputation on efficiency and results, not compassion. His decision-making process typically involved careful analysis of costs, benefits, and strategic advantages. Yet, here he was, abandoning his carefully planned day for a woman he'd never met and a child who had somehow managed to breach every professional boundary he'd established. "Let's just say you've managed to do what most of my executives can't. Get my full attention," he replied, though even as he spoke, he knew the answer was more complex than he was willing to admit. Sophia smiled, revealing a missing front tooth that made her look even younger, and impulsively slipped her small hand into his. The simple gesture of trust stunned him with its power. When was the last time someone had reached for him without agenda, without calculating what they might gain from the connection? Northwestern Memorial Hospital bustled with the controlled chaos of a major medical center as David Mitchell and Sophia walked through the main entrance. The CEO looked starkly out of place in his bespoke suit among medical staff in scrubs and worried families in casual clothes. But he moved with the same quiet authority he commanded in boardrooms. Sophia navigated the corridors with familiar ease. That troubled Mitchell. How many times had this child walked hospital halls alone? Her comfort with the environment suggested this wasn't her first experience with medical emergencies. "Room 317. The nurse at the station directed after checking her computer. "But sir, visiting hours don't start until—" Mitchell slid his business card across the counter with practiced efficiency. "I need to speak with Miss Chun about an urgent business matter." The combination of his corporate credentials and authoritative presence opened doors that might have remained closed to others. A privilege he rarely considered but found useful in this moment. They found Maria Chun propped up in the narrow hospital bed, her chestnut hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark circles beneath eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and worried thoughts. And 4-line ran from her arm to a bag of clear fluid, and despite her obvious illness, her resemblance to Sophia was striking. The same determined chin, the same intelligent eyes. "Sophia." Maria's voice was hoarse but filled with relief at seeing her daughter safe. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be with Mrs. Rodriguez." Her eyes widened as she noticed the imposing figure beside her daughter. "Oh my God, Mom, this is Mr. Mitchell. I went to your interview, and he brought me to see you." The color drained from Maria's already pale face as the implications of Sophia's statement hit her. Years of careful professionalism, of maintaining boundaries between her personal struggles and her career aspirations, had been shattered by her 7-year-old daughter's well-intentioned intervention. "You did what?" Maria struggled to sit up straighter despite the 4-line restricting her movement, mortification evident in every line of her body. Mitchell stepped forward, his business instincts recognizing Maria's embarrassment and moving to address it directly. "Miss Chun, your daughter made quite an impression. She presented your portfolio with remarkable poise and demonstrated a clear understanding of your qualifications." "I am so sorry," Maria said, her voice thick with humiliation and the lingering effects of her illness. "Sophia, we talked about this. You were supposed to call the company to reschedule, not go there yourself. But you worked so hard on your presentation," Sophia protested, climbing onto the chair beside her mother's bed with the easy familiarity of a child accustomed to hospital visits. "And we need the job. I heard you crying last night when you thought I was asleep." The raw honesty of Sophia's statement silenced the room. Maria's eyes filled with tears, partly from embarrassment, partly from love for her daughter's fierce loyalty, and partly from the overwhelming stress of their situation. Mitchell pulled a chair closer to the bed, his usual corporate distance softening in the face of their obvious bond. "Miss Chun, your daughter mentioned you were at Westlake until recently." Maria nodded, still processing the surreal situation of conducting a job interview from a hospital bed while connected to medical equipment. "Yes, I was there for 5 years. Before the acquisition and downsizing. It was a good position, stable income, excellent benefits. I thought we were secure." "Your portfolio is impressive," Mitchell continued, his tone becoming more businesslike as he focused on familiar territory. Why haven't you secured a position elsewhere with your qualifications? Maria glanced at Sophia, hesitating to discuss the harsh realities of single parenthood in front of her daughter, but knowing that Sophia had already been exposed to more of their financial struggles than any child should be. It's complicated, she said carefully. Single parent, no family support system, and a child with occasional medical needs. Most employers see that as a liability, even if they can't say it directly. Maria's voice grew stronger as she continued, frustration overriding her embarrassment. They ask subtle questions. What happens if Sophia gets sick? Do I have reliable childcare? Can I travel for business on short notice? They never directly state that my family situation is a problem, but their concerns become clear during the interview process. 8 interviews in 2 months, she added quietly. 8 rejections with polite explanations about finding a better fit or choosing a candidate with more flexibility. Sophia reached for her mother's hand, a gesture that spoke volumes about the partnership these two had forged in facing the world together. Mitchell watched as Sophia climbed onto the bed, instinctively checking her mother's foreline with the familiarity of someone who had done it before, a detail that stirred uncomfortable questions about how many medical emergencies this child had witnessed. The medical bills aren't helping our situation, Maria admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Even with the insurance from my previous position, pneumonia couldn't have come at a worse time. The COBRA payments are already stretching our budget, and now with emergency room visits and hospitalization. She trailed off, unwilling to burden Sophia with the full extent of their financial precariousness. Though Mitchell suspected the child understood more than her mother realized, the memory surfaced in Mitchell's mind, one he'd long suppressed beneath layers of professional achievement and emotional isolation. A woman much like Maria, struggling alone, determined to provide despite overwhelming odds. The parallel was too strong to ignore, too painful to acknowledge. Miss Chun, Mitchell said, his decision crystallizing even as he spoke. How soon can you recover? The doctor says I can leave tomorrow if my oxygen levels continue improving, but I won't be at full strength for at least a week. The respiratory therapist wants me to take it slowly to avoid a relapse. Then we'll conduct your official interview next Monday when you're feeling better. Mitchell reached into his jacket, producing a business card with his personal contact information. In the meantime, have the hospital billing department contact this number. Maria stared at the embossed card, her hands trembling slightly as she processed what he was offering. Mr. Mitchell, I can't accept charity. I need to earn this position on my own merits. Consider it in advance against future salary, Mitchell replied smoothly. Meridian takes care of its people, and based on your portfolio and your daughter's representation, I'm confident you'll be a valuable addition to our team. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, with Mitchell asking detailed questions about Maria's project management philosophy, her approach to team leadership, and her vision for improving efficiency in large-scale operations. Despite her illness and the unusual circumstances, Maria's answers demonstrated the competence and strategic thinking that had impressed him in her application materials. As they prepared to leave, Sophia whispered, "Thank you for helping my mom." Mitchell found himself wondering why her gratitude felt more valuable than his last million-dollar acquisition, why this child's simple trust had penetrated defenses he'd spent decades building. For the next 5 days, Sophia became an unexpected fixture at Meridian Enterprises. With Maria's reluctant permission, after Mitchell had arranged for car service, proper supervision, and daily check-ins with the hospital, Sophia spent her afternoons in an empty corner office near Mitchell's executive suite. The arrangement began as a practical necessity. Mrs. Rodriguez, despite her good intentions, was too elderly to provide adequate supervision for an active 7-year-old, and the hospital's visiting hours limited Sophia's time with her mother. Rather than leave the child alone or navigate the complexity of emergency childcare, Mitchell had made an executive decision that surprised his entire staff. Your operating margins could improve by reorganizing your supply chain, Sophia announced on Wednesday afternoon, looking up from her math homework as Mitchell stopped by to check on her progress. That he paused in the doorway, genuinely intrigued by her observation. Is that so? And where did you learn about operating margins? Mom explains her work to me when we're having dinner, Sophia replied, returning to her multiplication problems. She says talking through challenges helps her think better, and I like learning about what she does. Sophia tapped her pencil against her notebook, a gesture reminiscent of her mother's thoughtful pauses during their kitchen table discussions. Also, your receptionist Jennifer gives me business magazines when I get bored with my regular homework. The articles are pretty interesting once you get used to all the big words. Mitchell leaned against the door frame, studying this remarkable child who seemed equally comfortable discussing supply chain optimization and solving math problems. Most 7-year-olds read comic books and play video games. I read those too. Sophia replied with a grin that revealed her missing tooth. Batman is my favorite because he helps people and doesn't need superpowers to make a difference. Kind of like what you do here, but with money instead of a cape. An unexpected laugh escaped Mitchell, the kind of genuine amusement he hadn't experienced in years. Sophia had somehow managed to compare his corporate leadership to superhero work, and the analogy wasn't entirely wrong. By Thursday, Mitchell's executive team had begun noticing their CEO's unusual behavior. Patricia, his assistant of 15 years, observed him checking his watch before Sophia's scheduled arrival each day, clearing his calendar during her visit times, and displaying a level of patience with interruptions that was completely out of character. She reminds you of someone, Patricia remarked during their weekly scheduling meeting, placing budget reports on his desk while carefully studying his expression. Mitchell stiffened, his corporate mask sliding back into place with practiced ease. She's a child with remarkable potential who happens to be in a difficult situation. That's all. If you say so, Patricia replied, though her tone suggested she wasn't convinced. After working with Mitchell through corporate crises, hostile takeovers, and personal tragedies, she had learned to read the subtle signs that indicated deeper emotional involvement. The board members have been asking questions about your canceled meetings this week. The board can direct their questions to me directly, Mitchell replied curtly, his voice carrying the edge that typically ended uncomfortable conversations. But Patricia had been with him too long to be intimidated by his defensive responses. David, I've watched you build walls so high that some people call you the machine behind your back. If this child is helping you remember there's still a human being behind all that armor, maybe that's not such a bad thing. Later that afternoon, Mitchell found Sophia in the employee break room, surrounded by members of the marketing team who were hanging on her every word as she offered suggestions for their latest campaign targeting young families. Kids at my school would like the colors more if they were brighter, she was saying while the marketing director took notes with the seriousness typically reserved for client feedback sessions. And maybe if you showed families doing fun things together instead of just sitting around looking perfect in matching outfits. Miss Chun, Mitchell interrupted, though his tone was gentler than his usual corporate voice. I believe it's time for our daily appointment. It had become their ritual, a daily review of her mother's recovery progress and a discussion about what Sophia had learned during her unofficial internship at Meridian. These conversations had evolved from brief check-ins to genuine exchanges that Mitchell found himself anticipating throughout his busy days. In his office, Sophia settled into what had become her designated chair, a piece of furniture that had been reconfigured with a phone book to accommodate her height. Mitchell slid a chocolate milk across the desk, another element of their established routine. Mom's coming home tomorrow, Sophia announced, her relief evident as she sipped her drink. The nurse said her lungs sound much better, and the doctor thinks she'll be ready to start work next week. That's excellent news, Mitchell replied, though he realized with surprise that Sophia's impending departure from the office would leave a noticeable void in his daily routine. Will you still want to see me after Mom starts working here? Sophia asked suddenly, her question cutting through the comfortable atmosphere with unexpected vulnerability. The directness of her concern caught Mitchell off guard. In the space of a week, this child had become a regular part of his life, her presence bringing a warmth and authenticity that he hadn't realized he'd been missing. What makes you think I wouldn't want to continue our visits? He asked carefully. Sophia shrugged, looking down at her hands as she spoke. My dad didn't want to see me anymore after I was born. Mom says he just decided he didn't want to be a father. Sometimes people change their minds about kids, especially when it gets complicated. The simple statement struck Mitchell like a physical blow. In his 45 years of life, he'd faced hostile corporate takeovers, devastating market crashes, and betrayals by trusted colleagues. Yet nothing had prepared him for the disarming honesty of a 7-year-old discussing abandonment as if it were a common occurrence. "Sophia," he said carefully, choosing his words with the same precision he used in crucial business negotiations. "Some people leave because of their own limitations and fears, not because of anything wrong with the people they leave behind." He hadn't planned to share the photograph that day. It had remained locked in his desk drawer for nearly 2 decades, a painful reminder of dreams that had died too young. Yet something about Sophia's vulnerability, her courage in asking difficult questions, compelled him to open the drawer and remove the silver frame he'd hidden away. "This was my daughter," he said quietly, turning the frame towards Sophia. Her name was Grace. Sophia studied the photo of a smiling toddler with Mitchell's distinctive blue eyes and her mother's gentle smile. The little girl in the picture was captured mid-laugh, her chubby hands reaching toward the camera with the uninhibited joy that only very young children possess. "Where is she now?" Sophia asked with the direct curiosity of childhood, unaware that her question was reopening wounds that had never fully healed. Mitchell's voice grew distant, his gaze fixed on the photograph as he spoke. "She and her mother died in a car accident when Grace was 3 years old. A drunk driver ran a red light on a Sunday afternoon while they were coming home from the park. Is that why you get sad sometimes when you look at me?" The question hung in the air between them, crystalline in its clarity and devastating in its accuracy. Sophia had observed what others had missed, recognizing the shadow that crossed his face during unguarded moments. Mitchell met her gaze directly, honoring her honesty with his own. "Yes, sometimes you remind me of what I lost. But you also remind me of what's possible, of the joy that exists in the world even after terrible things happen." 6 months later, the same boardroom that had witnessed heated confrontations was filled with a very different energy. Charts and graphs on the wall displayed metrics that told an undeniable story of success, while newspaper clippings and industry awards spoke to Meridian's transformation from a traditional firm to an innovative leader in employee relations. Mitchell stood before an expanded board. 3 new members had replaced those who had resigned in protest, and presented the comprehensive results of what had become known as the Family Forward Initiative. "Employee retention has improved by 35%, Mitchell announced, his voice carrying satisfaction rather than vindication. "Productivity is up 28%, and our client satisfaction scores have reached industry-leading levels." Maria Chun, now serving as Director of Project Management and Family Integration, stood beside him with charts showing the expansion of family-friendly policies across all departments. Sophia, now 8 years old and a regular fixture in the company's child-friendly spaces, held a banner reading "Meridian Enterprises, where families thrive." The Chun case study has become a model for other companies, Maria reported to the board. "We've received consultation requests from 47 major firms seeking to implement similar programs." The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Several senior executives had initially resisted the changes, arguing that accommodating employees' family needs would compromise professional standards. However, the measurable improvements in performance and morale had gradually converted even the most skeptical managers. "Our recruiting success has been unprecedented," Patricia added, presenting data on hiring statistics. "We're receiving applications from top-tier candidates who previously wouldn't have considered us because of our reputation for work-life imbalance." Mitchell smiled as he watched Sophia interact with board members, answering their questions about the company's childcare facilities and educational programs with the same confidence she displayed during that first unexpected interview. "What we learned," Mitchell concluded, "is that supporting our employees as complete human beings doesn't compromise our business objectives, it amplifies them. When people feel secure about their family's well-being, they're more creative, more committed, and more productive." The new board chairman, Eleanor Roberts, nodded approvingly. "The numbers speak for themselves. This initiative has not only improved our workplace culture, but has also strengthened our competitive position in the market." After the presentation, Mitchell found himself in his transformed office, no longer the sterile monument to corporate achievement it had once been. Sophia's artwork adorned the walls alongside business awards. Family photos had joined professional accolades on his desk, and the atmosphere reflected the balance he'd learned to create between driving results and nurturing relationships that evening. Settled over Chicago, Maria appeared in the doorway, Sophia skipping beside her, both carrying the comfortable confidence of people who had found their place in the world. "Ready to head home?" Maria asked, her engagement ring catching the light, a development that had surprised no one who had watched their relationship evolve from professional collaboration to personal partnership over the months. "Almost finished," Mitchell replied, saving the document he'd been working on, just completing some paperwork for the foundation. The Mitchell Family Foundation had launched 3 months earlier, dedicated to helping companies nationwide implement family-friendly policies and supporting single parents pursuing career advancement. Sophia served as the official Chief Happiness Officer, a title she'd negotiated herself during a remarkably serious business meeting. As they walked toward the elevator, Sophia slipped her hand into his, a gesture that had become natural over the months but still filled him with wonder at the simple power of unconditional trust. "You know what I learned today?" Sophia announced as the elevator descended, her voice carrying the wisdom that seemed to emerge regularly from her conversations with adults throughout the building. "What's that, sweetheart?" Maria asked, adjusting her daughter's backpack with the automatic care of a mother managing countless daily details. "I learned that sometimes the best things happen when you're brave enough to ask for help, even when you're scared it might not work out the way you planned." Mitchell and Maria exchanged a look over Sophia's head, both remembering that morning 8 months ago when a determined child had walked into a corporate lobby and changed all their lives in ways none of them could have anticipated. "And sometimes," Sophia continued thoughtfully, "the people who seem the most important and busy are actually the ones who need help the most, even if they don't know how to ask for it." As they exited the building together, the Meridian Enterprises logo gleaming behind them in the evening light, Mitchell reflected on how completely his understanding of success had been transformed. The building that had once served as a monument to his professional achievements now stood as a symbol of hope for working families throughout the city. Sometimes the most important meetings of our lives come disguised as interruptions. Sometimes our greatest opportunities arrive in packages we never expected to receive. And sometimes, just sometimes, a child's simple courage can heal wounds we thought would last forever, opening our hearts to possibilities we had stopped believing existed. The story of Sophia Chun and David Mitchell reminds us that corporate success and family values aren't opposing forces. They're complementary strengths that, when properly balanced, create something far more powerful than either could achieve alone. Sometimes it takes the innocent wisdom of a child to show us that the most important bottom line isn't profit. It's the people who make those profits possible and the lives that give meaning to all our achievements. In a world that often demands we choose between professional ambition and personal connection, their story proves that the greatest success comes not from sacrifice, but from the courage to embrace both, creating workplaces and communities where families don't just survive, they thrive. This has been the Black Side Stories. Until next time, remember, behind every great achievement is someone who stood watch, someone who believed, someone who preserved what matters when no one else was looking.